So there's about 500 million bookings on Airbnb alone last year. Just Airbnb. That doesn't include Vrbo or direct booking. So, a lot of people are like, oh, Airbnb is dead. And I'm like,
Right.
dude,
Not quite.
every year it gets bigger and bigger, substantially.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of The Remote Investor. It's my first one back after having a kid, so bear with me if I stumble over my words a little bit. Thankfully, I don't have too big of bags under my eyes, but super excited to be back and hosting, especially with today's guest. We have Kirby Atwell, who is the host of the Living Off Rentals podcast, as well as a short-term investor. And he's going to be talking to us all about short-term rentals in not the strategy that you might think of when you hear the term short-term investing or short-term rentals. So let's get into it. Kirby, what's going on, man? It's great to see you again.
It's awesome to be here, buddy. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Oh, no. The pleasure is all mine. I'm super excited to chat with you today. So for anyone that might not be familiar with who you are and your story, give us a quick and dirty. Who are you? Where do you come from? And what do you do in real estate today?
Yeah, sure. So I am originally from Chicago, grew up in the suburbs. And I always knew two things when I was growing up. I knew I wanted to serve in the military. There's a lot of guys in my family that had served in the military. And so I knew I wanted to do that, but I also have always been like more of an entrepreneur, which doesn't necessarily jive with the military.
So, cookie cutter, right, is what they teach you.
Yeah, exactly. So I knew I was going to serve, but I didn't want it to be a career. But my dad, who was an enlisted guy, said, if you're going to go in the Army, you might as well be an officer because they just drink coffee and hang out all day and golf and stuff. They don't do any real work like us enlisted guys. So he's like, you got to try to go to West Point. So I was playing football in high school, and that's what got me in the door at West Point. So I got in, even though I shouldn't have probably got in. And I went to West Point for 4 years. I was commissioned as an officer in the Army. And then when I was at my first duty station, still trying to, I always had this entrepreneurial bug. I picked up the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, like so many people do, the gateway drug into real estate investing, as I like to call it.
Perfect way to say it, yeah.
And so I read that when I was down in El Paso at Fort Bliss as a lieutenant, and I just got hooked. I was like, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. I want to be in real estate investing. I want to build cash flow. So bought a few rentals while I was in the Army, and then I got out and just dove in head first in 2011 into real estate investing. Amazing.
And the first couple of properties you bought, were they local to you in Texas? Were they remote? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh, man. Yeah. So it was kind of funny because I read the book and I was like hooked on the idea. And I guess I was just like really dumb. Like I just really was like, this works no matter what. So I'm going to just go out and buy a property. So this was 2006, the peak of,
great time to buy.
Yeah. Luckily, I was stationed in El Paso, Texas, which is like nothing happens in El Paso, Texas. Like the market doesn't go up or down. The rest of the world could be on fire. It's like the exact same all the time. It's like the most stable market ever. So I got home. I was living with like three buddies in this house, and the house across the street, there was a for sale sign. And I knew like everything sells immediately. So I walked across the street, didn't even know that you're supposed to use an agent. I knock on their door. I'm like, hey, I want to buy your house. And they're like, well, it's not even on the market yet. They just put the sign in front. We don't even know what we're going to ask. And I said, well, whatever it is, just let me know because I want to buy it. And so they called me, and it was $101,000, turnkey, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. So it was a nice like starter investment property.
Yeah.
And I bought it, and the market, I sold it like 10 years later. It went up to like 110, I think. So it never crashed, never went up really, but it was stable, and it was a good one to cut my teeth on. So I bought a few like that in El Paso. I bought in Hawaii actually in 2009 after the market crashed because I was stationed there. Luckily, the timing was just really good, and that one really did well.
Dang.
So I got a couple in the Army and then transitioned into it full time.
That's awesome. So that first one you bought, was that like you bought it as a house hack and then you went and moved in with the buddies, or you just literally kept staying in where you were living and then rented that house across the street out?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we were just finishing up some training, so we were all kind of going different ways. So I had to move out anyway, but I knew I wanted to have an investment property. So I went and bought another house actually after that. Because in 2006, they're like giving away loans, like, at 7-Eleven, is
you got a pulse, here's a loan.
Exactly. So the first one was 100% financing on a conventional loan.
Oh my
And then the
God.
second one I had to put down, I think 5%. Um,
Oh,
and
tough.
yeah, yeah. So I bought that second one. Then that turned into a rental when I got stationed in Hawaii after that. So
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, that's amazing, man. And so you're military, really appreciate your service. Thank you so much. Did you leverage the VA loan at all? Or is that something that you took advantage of?
Yeah, I wish that's a great question. I mean, so many service members have this opportunity that they don't even know about. And I didn't even know about it till after I was in real estate investing full time for several years. But you can use your VA loan up to 4 units. The income or suspected income from the other 3 units that you're not living in yourself can be counted toward your debt to income ratio. So you can literally qualify for $1 million property on just like a typical salary if you buy like a 4 unit that you're going to house hack, and it's 100% financing at some of the best rates. So it is amazing. I didn't know about it, didn't use it at all when I was in the Army. It wasn't until like 8 years after I got out of the Army that I used it on my first primary residence, and it's been awesome.
So okay, so I was going to ask, do you know like the details for anybody listening that is a veteran or that is active duty? Like, can you only use it once you're out of the military? Can you use it when you're in the military? Does it expire after you've been discharged after X amount of years? Can you give us a little bit of color on that?
Yeah, if you're military or veteran, you have access to it. I forget when you qualify. It's after a certain amount of time in the military, but I think it's a pretty short amount of time. So while you're in the military, you can use it.
Okay.
100% financing, never expires. If you have some sort of disability rating from the military, they even waive the funding fee, which is a small fee up front. It's a few $1,000s, but that's even waived. So some people walk out of closing with a check for a couple $1,000s and a house and never put a penny down on the property. It has to be a primary residence for at least a year. So you can use
Okay.
it on, like I said, a 4 unit, live in one for a year, rent out the other three, move out of it after a year and rent out all four and have 100% financing. I mean, the versatility is amazing. So yeah, and it doesn't expire. You can use it multiple times too, which is a lot of people think you can only use it once. You can use it multiple times. There's just some stipulations around it. So
Okay.
I would highly recommend, if someone wants to use it, work with somebody who does them all the time, because that's the key. Like a typical loan officer or loan broker who does one every 4 years, it's going to fall apart. It's going to be a mess.
Okay.
There's a lot of like little nuanced things to these working with the VA that you really have to understand. But I know a couple of loan officers that are incredible with this. So you can always reach out to me. I'll refer them over, and that's all they do. I mean, constantly, and they just it goes very smoothly.
What an amazing tool.
Yeah.
Well, dude, if you ever decide that real estate is kind of boring, you could have a second career as a military recruiter and just talk about this and get so many people in the door. Like it's a really incredible tool.
Yeah. Forget about having to go fight in foreign wars. You get a VA loan.
Right.
I mean,
go do the officer route,
exactly.
Go play golf, drink coffee, and go buy real estate. I love it.
Exactly.
I love it. Well, talk to me a little bit about, so okay, you got out of the military and then you went straight into real estate investing full time. Had you just acquired enough rentals throughout your career in the military to fund your life and essentially be financially independent? What does that look like?
Yeah, I wish. No, I'm not like the smartest guy. I tend to.
You're in very good company.
yeah. I tend to stick with things well, and so eventually I figure stuff out. But no, I was like, I just want to do this full time. I'm going to figure it out as I go. So I moved back to Chicago. I was stationed in Japan. That was where I ended my service. I was a commander of this Homeland Defense site over there. Moved back home on like a Thursday, I had an appointment with a realtor the next day on a Friday to start looking at properties. Like I'd set it up from Japan. Like I was so ready to get into it. I was so excited. I thought it was just going to be this straight line trajectory of like success. So I moved into my parents' basement. So basically go from Captain Atwell to back in high school again, living in my parents' basement. And I started looking at properties, and it was a tough transition. I was so ready to get out and be an entrepreneur. But even that, like, you work so hard to create this identity, and overnight it's gone, And then the next day people are like, so who are you? What do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm a real estate investor, and I haven't really done any deals yet. I'm just kind of like living in my parents' basement. And, so it was a tough transition to reinvent myself. But eventually I partnered with a couple friends, and we started flipping houses. We started a house flipping company in Chicago, because long-term financing for single family to 4 units really didn't exist back then. Like DSCR loans, people don't realize those are pretty new. In 2011, it was like conventional loans was it pretty much.
Right. And if you didn't have a job, forget about it.
Exactly. So we started flipping houses because I was like, well, it's really the only thing we can do to make money. And so we flipped about 70 houses around Chicago.
70?
Yeah. Over the next 5 years. And it started slow with one. And then we did a couple at the same time and then a few more. And then we started hiring staff and got an office. And I realized after 5 years, I was in the exact same spot financially as when I started. And after I'd gone through all the stress, effort, we made millions in gross income.
Yeah.
But with a house flipping company, and I'm not just talking about doing the occasional house flip here and there. I think that's great because you can make some money, extra money that way. But a house flipping company, your P&L, like the income, depends on you doing 4 or 5 flips a month, right? So because we just kept growing the size of our company and the overhead kept growing with it. And so we eventually got to a place where we're putting out tens of thousands of dollars of marketing to get off market deals. Got to screen all those leads. So we had a staff screening those leads, basically a mini call center in our office. Have to monitor this rehab process with all these different contractors and all this stuff that goes sideways with that. And then sits on the market longer than you think. So we always had just enough to survive on and never got ahead. It was this giant treadmill that we just kept, it was just getting bigger and bigger. And so I realized after 5 years, what I really got into this for and what really like gets me excited when I'm reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad is the thought of financial freedom, like supporting myself with the cash flow, not like creating this stressful job for myself. So that's when I transitioned into rentals after 5 years of flipping houses.
Okay. And so did you keep all the rentals that you had built up while you were in the military, or had those been sold off by the time you got out?
Yeah, I had 3 of them. I bought 2 in El Paso and then 1 in Hawaii. So I had 3 of them and I still had those. A little bit of cash flow here and there. The one in Hawaii, really, I sold it basically after I transitioned from flipping into rentals. I decided to consolidate basically and sell those off, kind of tap into that equity from the Hawaii property and use some of that to start buying rentals locally in Chicago. And I built up then a portfolio of 26 long-term rentals that were pretty decent cash flowing rentals for long-term rentals. And that's when, after a few years, I discovered this strategy that I'm doing now of really high cash flowing short-term rentals.
I love it. And before we get there, Kirby, just real quick question for being a Chi-Town guy: Lou Malnati's or Pequods? Or Gino's East, maybe?
I'd say Lou's. Yeah.
Yes. A man after my own heart. And for anyone who doesn't know, those are Chicago staples, deep dish pizza staples. My mom's from Chicago, so I grew up on Lou's.
Yeah. One piece and you're stuffed.
And you're done.
Yeah.
You're done.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sweet. Okay. So now back to the good stuff. So you are now operating and buying short-term rentals, high cash flow. I mean, obviously it sounds great. Everybody likes high cash flow. What is that?
Yeah. So we moved personally. So after we started building the long-term rental portfolio, we moved from Chicago to Northwest Indiana, just because way lower taxes, nice lifestyle, but you're still like an hour from Chicago. So still get kind of access to the city. And over there, the long-term rent rate is just really low. It's very difficult to make any cash flow long-term, but we realized we could buy the same properties at the same price point, which was, $100,000, $200,000 properties, and rent them as short-term rentals. And there's still enough people that want to go to Lake Michigan, the Dunes National Park. There's a casino there. There's outlet malls. There's wineries in the area. You're an hour away from Chicago. That nightly rates and occupancy actually are pretty solid. And so experimented with it in our basement first. We converted our basement into a 1-bedroom apartment and it worked really well. And so then we bought this really affordable house and I'm like, okay, I'm still not sold. Like if this all falls apart and doesn't work, I can make it a long-term rental and it cash flows well. And so tried it on that and it, again, just started booking up like crazy. And so then we were kind of like, okay, this makes sense. And then we started optimizing into these small multi-units that were still really affordable, but then we have 2-3 streams of income coming in on one relatively low set of fixed expenses. And the net flow on that just was kind of off the charts.
I freaking love it, dude. And so, okay, so are you managing these yourself? Are they in your backyard because now you've moved, now you're living there? What does that look like?
Yeah. Yeah, we are managing them ourselves. And when I stopped flipping, I started building the portfolio of rentals, but I also went back and got a corporate job because I was like, I got to feed my family somehow and pay the bills. And so I was working a full-time job while building up my rental portfolio. And so once we discovered this strategy, we're like, okay, let's sell off all the long-term rentals because it's not much cash flow for a lot of headaches, it felt like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
And were
and
you
if
managing the long-term stuff yourself as
Yeah,
well?
exactly. And it was all
Okay.
in Illinois. So I was like kind of a further drive now.
Okay.
But if we're like, we can just buy 8 of these properties that are relatively low cost. Each one at the time we were estimating about $1,000 of net cash flow, but it's actually once we got into multi units, it was quite a bit more. But we're like, okay, if we can get 8 with $8,000 coming in, I'll feel comfortable enough to pull the trigger, leaving my job, and we can then grow it from there. And so that's exactly what we did. And 4 years ago, we got to that place. I left my corporate job, and since then, we built up 39 listings, and just doing 1 or 2 at a time since then. And it's been a godsend for our family and family's financial future.
That is so cool, man. So, okay, so you're still managing all 39 of these
Oh
listings
yeah, sorry,
yourself?
that was the original question that you asked me, and I didn't answer.
Well, we were
Yes,
having so much fun talking
yeah,
about other stuff.
yes. So I we started with us managing them ourselves. Like the one in the basement, my wife, we had a 1-year-old at the time when we first started, or actually, I don't think he was even one. She was cleaning it. We're taking all the bookings, like we're doing everything ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we get the second one, and it was like, okay, my mother-in-law was like, okay, I'm retired. I could clean it for you. And, and then our babysitter and then our people from our church were like, yeah, I'd want a part-time job. And so it organically grew with different people that we trusted and knew, and we knew would do a good job to do like the boots on the ground stuff. And we were doing everything remotely, like taking all the bookings, lining up the cleaners, all that stuff up until we got to 5. And once we got to 5, that was like the tipping point for us where we're like, okay, we have enough economies of scale and cash flow that it makes sense to bring on a relatively low cost virtual assistant that can do this from anywhere, and they can take all the bookings, they can do all the day to day. And that freed up so much time.
Mm-hmm.
And so since then, we've grown it to 4 full time virtual assistants now. And they're Filipino based, amazing individuals, like speak perfect English, um, understand the guests. They all had like 5 years of, or plus 5 years plus experience with short-term rental management when I hired them. So
Oh
like
my
the
gosh.
nuances of understanding, like if a guest issue comes up, like how to read through, like read between the lines on stuff. I didn't have to train them, and they're, $8 an hour, $10 an hour. Like it's really affordable from a business standpoint, but yet just incredibly effective.
That's incredible. So, what are you doing? As I'm thinking through this question, I'm like, it's going to sound so rude, but I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what things do you have to still do, or have you
Yeah,
been truly able to kind of
just sit
offshore
around
so
all
much of
day.
your business? Yeah, well, play golf and
Yeah,
drink coffee.
yeah, exactly. I mean, as an officer, like that, I learned well. No, it's a good question, and that is exactly one of the points I want to make here. Actually, is um, one of the turning points for us was my wife and I got married in 2015, and this was like toward the tail end of me flipping, and all of a sudden I went from like just looking out for myself and kind of chasing this vague idea of what success meant based on
Mm-hmm.
everyone else, all the shiny objects,
Mm-hmm.
to being married and saying, okay, what do we want our life together to look like? And what's important to us? What's the game that we want to play, not somebody else's game? And once we defined that, it was so different than what I was doing previously. And we realized that actually we don't care at all about any of the shiny objects. Like I'm not chasing a Bentley or a private jet. If I never ride in
Mm-hmm.
one, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
I got a pickup truck that I love parked outside, and I'm good with that.
Mm-hmm.
But what was really important was autonomy. We wanted to own our schedule, and we wanted to spend a ton of time with our family. And we wanted to live on a farm, which we have a 45-acre farm now that we live on. And we just wanted to, not be the parents that came home for an hour at the end of the day and saw their kids. And that was the extent of their parenting. Not that, some people don't have that choice, but that was just intentionally, we wanted to get to a place where that didn't happen. And it wasn't overnight, but that was when this strategy really presented itself to us, that we realized, okay, we could actually do this and get to that place. And so then the question is, once you get to a place where your expenses are covered, then what? Like, is the point of life to get to a place where you can just sit around all day and do nothing? I don't think so.
Right.
And so then it was like, okay, how do you have the biggest impact on other people? And that was what we kept going back to, is like impact then. And so now I primarily work with other people. I have my podcast, I have my YouTube channel, I have this program that's where I walk people through the steps of finding and buying their first really high cash flowing short-term rental. So I work personally with each person in that program. And so that takes up most of my time, because the day-to-day of our properties is pretty automated.
I love that. And real quick, Kirby, what is your podcast called, and YouTube channel, and your program called?
Yeah, everything is pretty much living off rentals. So if you go to Living Off Rentals, the podcast called Living Off Rentals, YouTube channel, the program's called First Vacation Rental Investment Blueprint.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a ton of like free content that I put out all the time. And then the program is more for like somebody who's like, okay, this is the strategy that I want to commit to. And I work personally with them through the process then.
Love it. So let's kind of dissect a little bit of what you just shared with us, Kirby. So someone's listening to this, they are that person. They're like, oh my God, this is amazing. I want to try it on my own first, because there's so many DIYers out there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how soon realistically could they expect to start hiring a VA or bring somebody else in to do some of the day-to-day stuff? Like, for you, it was 5. Was that too soon? Was that maybe a little too late? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that's not the first thing to focus on. I would say
how to stop doing the day to day.
Well, yeah. I mean, just like getting the VA, I don't think is super important in the beginning if you don't have any deals yet, obviously. But I think 5 is a good tipping point number from what I've seen. All the people I've worked with over the years, that seems to be a really good one. It might be a little bit sooner for some, a little bit later for others. But if you have a host and co-host, like my wife and I were host and co-host listed on our listings, we could easily respond to a few messages a day, which if you have a few properties, that's about what you're going to get, And so As long as you have the boots on the ground covered with a good cleaner and handyman, the remote stuff you can handle pretty easily in the beginning. So I would say focus all your effort on just finding a great deal in the beginning. And then, as you start to scale, organically grow your systems with the size of your business.
Okay. And as you're looking for markets and as you're coaching folks to go buy their first investment property, I mean, how do you identify what a great deal is? Because it's so market specific. Like you found folks wanting to visit those local attractions and amenities and outdoor activities. Like that doesn't exist in every market. So how do you coach folks into finding a great market and then finding a great deal?
Great question. So there's about 500 million bookings on Airbnb alone last year. Just Airbnb. That doesn't include Vrbo or direct bookings. So, a lot of people are like, oh, Airbnb is dead. No, dude,
not quite.
Every year it gets bigger and bigger, substantially. So 500 million bookings. So when you say the term Airbnb though, or vacation rental or short-term rental, people think of the nice luxury single family home next to the ocean.
Villa.
Yeah, exactly. Or in the Smoky Mountains or Joshua Tree or, all the mainstream vacation areas, because they think it's just a vacation rental. That's all it is. Like you can just use it for vacations. We literally have hundreds of reasons that people stay with us because they typically tell you why they're coming. And it's not, there's a lot of vacations, but there's also just common reasons: weddings, funerals, visiting family, work trips, all that stuff. So I think the best intersection of factors, I guess, that lead to the highest cash flowing place is typically, I see it in the Midwest and Southeast primarily because it's just much cheaper than the coastal areas.
Mm-hmm.
But then just outside of cities, so like the same property that we buy for $200,000 in Michigan City, Indiana, is $800,000 in like a nice neighborhood in Chicago. So it's 4 times as much, but yet you look at the nightly rate and we might be 20% or 30% less in nightly rate, you know? So
Yeah.
when you look at the cash flow then, and then also tax wise, like we're a tiny, like less than $1,000 a month or a year on some of our properties compared to Chicago. It's like insane. Insurance wise, much cheaper. So all your expenses are so much lower, but yet your nightly rate and cash flow or occupancy are pretty high. But you can't just pick any random area that's cheap. It has to be close enough to a population center where you get these draws that people are coming for all these different reasons. There's some local draws there typically. You know, some people like buy next to a traveling sports facility or, a museum in the area or a water park or, something that people aren't going to fly cross country and it's like a mainstream thing, but you get consistent traffic coming through there. And then just a lower cost and higher nightly rate. You can look at the averages on like AirDNA to see, where is that ratio the best, the highest nightly rate and occupancy combination compared to the lowest average purchase price. So those are some of the best places. And there's a lot of them out there, surprisingly. Can't just pick any random area, but those are the key factors to look for.
I love it. And when you're talking about like a population center, is there a number that you have in mind of like 300,000, 500,000, a million for what you would call like a true population center, quote unquote?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say there's a specific rule of thumb. So just to give you some examples of great deals recently that I've gone through with people in my program that have followed the system and brought them. One that we just went through on Monday is in Milwaukee. It's a 2-unit turnkey, mostly turnkey. You got to do some updating on it to make it really nice, but really nice 2-unit next to Milwaukee Airport. A few miles from Milwaukee Airport. $275,000 is the asking price.
Okay.
And so the benefit of that, like when you look at because you can look at any of the comps around it and see reviews and when they were left, and you can see it's just consistent reviews. Like year round, the nightly rate's going to be much higher in the summer and lower in the winter, but you have the benefit of being close to a big transportation hub. You're like close, you're not downtown Milwaukee where it's like really expensive, but you're just kind of on the outskirts, really inexpensive. And so that's an ideal place. And obviously Milwaukee, I don't know, probably has a couple million, I would think, in population. But then also another one that just came across was Sault Ste. Marie in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, which most people have never heard of, but it's a border town.
I'm one of them.
Yeah. I hadn't either, actually, when this was brought to me. But again, following the system, look for a place with relatively high occupancy and nightly rate compared to really affordable purchase price. So the average purchase price in Sault Ste. Marie is $160,000. I don't know what the population there is. I should probably look that up, but nowhere near Milwaukee. But still, They have a ton of infrastructure being built. It's on the Canadian. It's a border town, so on the Canadian border. So there's people constantly traveling through there. And their occupancy rate was really good because of that. And so, a guy I work with found a 2-unit for $140,000 that is, again, relatively turnkey. He's putting about $40,000 into it, but you can do the math on that. Even if you're close to the averages per unit, that adds up to be. I mean, I think he's going to make around like $65,000 a year in gross income on that, and then you subtract out your expenses, which are really low. That leads to significant cash flow.
Oh my gosh. I love this. This is super, super cool. And I'm totally one of those people that when I hear Airbnb or vacation rental, I think of the Ritz-Carlton style properties, but like this is the Holiday Inn or the Ramada, whatever a reasonably priced hotel is. That's like very middle of the road that just caters to your everyday individual. It doesn't have to be this $10,000 a night, 20-bedroom thing.
The other cool thing about this too is those areas that like Scottsdale or the Smoky Mountains, those attract people who are like, I've got some money. That's like that's the terms that they think in terms of like mainstream. And
Yeah.
also institutions, like that's where they're drawn. When you look at Sault Ste. Marie, you put in the address, it's like mom and pop at best. Like the
Yeah.
competition is extremely low. So if you're intentional there, you can dominate that market. Your listing will stand as amazing amongst the others because it's a lot of people that just like woke up and they're like, yeah, it'd be cool to list my house on Airbnb today and, take some dark pictures of whatever's there.
Yes.
And that's it.
So I found the exact same thing on Furnish Finder. We converted our old primary into midterm rental because we couldn't do short term because of HOA. But I was looking around at the other Furnish Finder listing. I was like, literally, people taking mom and pop pictures on their flip phones or like sidekicks back in the day, and it's just not professional. So to your point, exactly, if you have any kind of level of professionalism, go get photos taken. Like you can totally stand out and start to attract people. So, and that's what we found. Like, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Kirby, talk to us about like if somebody's listening and they don't have any experience in the short-term rental space. Long-term rentals, we kind of know what our overhead and our traditional expenses look like. What should someone be expecting or prepared for in the short-term space?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think most people think of long-term rentals as less risky because of the fact that you have a set amount coming in on the first of the month, every month, right? And so they associate that set amount with less risk. But like they'll give up literally 4 times the income on the same property because in the summertime it comes in a lot more, and in the wintertime it's a lot less. But averaged throughout the entire year, you're literally getting 4 times as much and significantly more net cash flow in a lot of cases. Like I'm not just saying a blanket statement on every property, but in a lot of cases. But people will say, well, that's risky because it's not coming in on the first of every month. So it feels higher risk and it feels more management intensive, but the expenses are higher. And what I've found is if you're following this strategy, it's typically about a 60% expense ratio is where it typically falls. So I have this 1% net rule that I follow when I'm evaluating a deal because people were asking me like, what can I expect in terms of good cash flow? And $2,000 a month cash flow is nice, but if you're paying $2 million to get it, compared to a $200,000 property that can get you $2,000 a month, very, very, very different investment, right? So, so I came up with this 1% net of if I'm spending, whatever I'm buying the property for, I want 1% of that in net cash flow after all my expenses on a monthly basis. So if I'm buying a $300,000 property, then gross wise, and it's very difficult to do with just a single family home. That's why I focus on multi-units. Yeah. But let's say I buy a 3-unit for $300,000, then that needs to bring in probably around like $7,000 on a monthly basis, gross between the 3 units, which is extremely doable. I mean, even if the average of $130 nightly rate added up, 60% occupancy, you're there, right? So $7,000 a month, and then you're going to have things like cleaning fees. You're going to have utilities, Wi-Fi, consumables. You provide the toilet paper, paper towels, that stuff, lawn maintenance. So you're going to have about $3,000 in expenses from typically this is what I see, or this is what you want to shoot for in terms of the type of deal. So, I'm sorry, $4,000 in expenses. So then you're left with $3,000 a month of net cash flow. So $300,000 property, $3,000 net cash flow.
Net cash. Okay. And then, but in the $4,000, are you including a mortgage in that expense or is that?
Yep.
Yeah, you are. You are. Okay.
Yeah. So like $300,000 property, 75% DSCR loan on it, 75% loan to value. So, your mortgage is going to be, I don't know, 235, something like that, whatever that equates to. You're talking probably less than $2,000 a month for a mortgage, probably $1,500 a month, something like that. So really affordable mortgage, and then taxes, insurance, that sort of thing. So it's probably about $4,000 in expenses there.
Kirby, what are we still doing recording this podcast? We need to get off and go buy some of these ASAP. This is incredible stuff. Well, oh man, I have so many questions, and we don't have enough time to go through. We'll have to have you back on and do another episode. In thinking about like setting this up and managing it, like I would go out tomorrow and buy one of these. Is this something that still make sense if you hire a professional manager. If somebody listening loves their job, really is enjoying what they're doing, this sounds like a great investment to enhance their lifestyle, enhance their financial position, but don't want to leave their job. Do the numbers still make sense with hiring a manager?
I would say even with a 9 to 5 job, even with the stressful 9 to 5 job, I would still recommend doing it yourself because it really just isn't that much work. And what I've seen is that people will say, yeah, I'm going to hire a property manager and eventually I'll take it over myself. But you learn so much on your first one. Like I don't recommend anyone to buy like all the extra tack on services for short-term rentals. Like automated pricing, price labs. That's another thing that you can buy, and they'll price it for you. And automated messaging services and stuff like that. Like in the beginning, I recommend doing all that yourself on the first one because you learn what your guests love, what they don't love, how to price. Like pricing is an art in itself.
Yeah, I've heard
it is
that.
amazing how terrible people are with pricing when you look at comps. They're like, it's $150 a night place, and I'm like, man, you are getting no bookings in the off season. You're getting killed in the peak season because that's when you should be making 5 times that much, and they just don't get it. So there's a whole art behind pricing. So do it yourself and you learn, and then you can scale organically. And again, like I spend a few hours a week maybe on our properties at this point, and we don't pay anywhere close to 20 to 30%, which is what a property manager charges. They take 20 to 30% of your gross bookings off the top.
Right.
And it's very difficult then, even with these really high cash flowing ones, to get to a place of financial freedom. So
yes, man. That's what I pay. I think 25% for property managers, short-term property managers. So, I mean, it's not cheap.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's scenarios where it might make sense. I'm not like telling anyone what they should do, but I would say I would encourage you to try it yourself first to see, because I think you'll find that it's just not that once you get some good people in place, it can kind of run itself pretty easily.
I love this. This has been so fun, Kirby. Man, is there I just have so many more questions I want to ask you, but I'm gonna be very conscientious of your time. If people want to reach out and learn more about you, take advantage of your program, check out some of your free content, where's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, and I'd love to talk to you about it. And I would just also tell people too, I was just reading this week, I think I'm going to do a video about this, but there's a Bigger Pockets article that came out. They email it to you on their weekly newsletters. And this guy said, not short-term rent. He said, cash flow is a myth. That was what it was called. Cash flow is a myth. And the whole article showed.
So clickbaity?
Yeah, exactly. And he was saying how, in his market, which is Kansas City, like take the average property and average mortgage and, the average rent, and you're upside down $500 a month, and I'm sitting there reading that. And he said, everyone I've ever talked to who's successful in real estate said cash flow wasn't how they got really wealthy. It's just like, it's from the appreciation and stuff like that, which I get. Like, you're not going to build a ton of wealth by buying really affordable properties that cash flow really well, but you get to freedom, and then you can build wealth. Like once you've replaced your income, you get tens of thousands of hours for the rest of your life that like are freed up now. You don't owe to somebody, and you can build significant wealth. So I would say just look into it, because don't just do what's always been done and say, well, it doesn't work anymore.
Yes.
Look at, it's like a newspaper guy saying, well, media's dead today. Like media just doesn't work. It's like, well, Joe Rogan would probably disagree with you. Like if you're selling newspapers, it doesn't work. But like, look at like what's available today, because we live in a different world. And so there's amazing opportunities with the type of financing and the type of rentals that are out there to make incredible cash flow. So to answer your question again, I always avoid your question. You can reach out to me by, you can go to any of the platforms like Living Off Rentals. And, I'm on all the platforms. We have a Facebook group, Living Off Rentals Facebook group, a closed group that you can join. You can email me at Kirby at Green Vet Homes. So Green Vet Homes is my real estate buying company, the acquisition side of the company. So greenvethomes.com. All the different ways, but Living Off Rentals, you'll find all the stuff.
This is great. And just going back to that article for a second, it's so funny
Yeah.
because as you said it, I'm like, I had this screaming part of my brain. It's like, oh, so what you're saying is if I just don't be average, I won't have that problem. And it's like, yeah,
Exactly.
just don't go buy an average deal. Go buy a better than average deal. Like, and you'll be fine. Cash flow is not dead.
Exactly. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Kirby, this is a ton of fun, man. Thanks so much for taking the time, and definitely look forward to catching up again soon.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's been
My
awesome.
pleasure. Cool, man. Be well. Okay, everyone, that was our episode. A huge thank you to Kirby for coming on, dropping some amazing knowledge and wisdom. If you couldn't tell from the episode, I was getting super excited just chatting with Kirby about the strategy and looking to go get involved in it myself. So if you are also interested, check out his websites. We link down below the show notes, and we love hearing from you. So ratings, reviews are great, help spreading the word, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Happy investing.